Allowing foreign nationals to cancel out the votes of American citizens makes a mockery of our democracy, and it robs Americans of our sovereign right to direct our own government and decide our own destiny. Washington, D.C. belongs to the American people, who retain through their Constitution the exclusive right to govern it through their elected representatives. This outrageous law is the strongest argument yet for Congress to take back America's capital city for America and to take back America from the radical left.
Here's Justice Scalia on what the very distinguished gentleman from California just described as a radical practice. In general, non-citizen voting has been open, widespread, and unchallenged since the early days of the Republic, says Justice Scalia. What they would like to portray as some kind of outlandish practice is one that has been used at various points in our history by a majority of the states, certainly at the local level. And it was the Republican Party, again, I reemphasize, which was the great champion of non-citizen voting and stood up for it against the states that ended up seceding from the Union in the Civil War. We were debating the very point the gentleman fastened upon when we talked about the census. The Supreme Court has been emphatic repeatedly that the census counts everyone in America, citizens and non-citizens alike. Now, we know they don't like that. They've been trying to get around it in a dozen different ways, but the Supreme Court has been perfectly clear that everyone is counted in the census, even if they don't have the right to vote, even if they're not a citizen.
The D.C. City Council has made a very short-sighted decision that I fear could be a harbinger around the country. And that decision, I believe, lessens and cheapens citizenship. We see that in other areas. But the D.C. City Council has moved to allow non-citizens, including illegal aliens and foreign agents, to vote in local D.C. elections. In fact, not only are they allowed to vote, they're being encouraged. You can look at this flyer right here. This was just sent out by Washington, D.C. to encourage people to vote. Yes, there may be 500 who are registered. This is a year old, but there are 50,000, according to Washington, D.C. statistics, that are eligible. I find it inconceivable that the City Council and now other city councils around the United States would intentionally dilute the voting power of their constituents for non-citizens who otherwise might not meet the requirements, might not pay taxes, might not be members of the community that want the same things as those who are citizens. And therefore, I believe it is cheapening and lessening citizenship. Let's look beyond the Democrats' call for this bill to be deemed discriminatory or false claims about its intended purpose. I'm asking my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to look ahead, to put citizenship back in its rightful place as the gold standard. Free and fair elections are a prerequisite for a healthy republic. I believe that's what our founders intended, and non-citizen voting, whether it's one vote or a million votes, dilutes the voting power of the citizen. I believe Congress must act clearly and decisively to bar non-citizens from voting in any election, including in Washington, D.C., and I urge my colleagues to support my resolution. With that, I yield back.
Just a couple of quick points about the distinguished gentleman's remarks. First of all, what we're talking about is making a federal decision or a congressional decision for a locality. Now, the gentleman's native Texas had non-citizen voting from 1869 to 1921. For a half century, Texas had it. And that policy is one that was completely up to them. It was never overruled by the federal government. The gentleman says that foreign agents could vote under this legislation. Of course, foreign agents can vote all across the country today. People who register under the Foreign Agent Registration Act or fail to register under FARA and are convicted for that still have the right to vote. I believe Michael Flynn is still voting despite the fact that he failed to register under FARA. Paul Manafort is still voting. Other people who have been foreign agents don't automatically lose their right to vote because of that. But in the District of Columbia, if somebody wants to register from a foreign country, they effectively have to renounce their right to vote in the foreign country because the District of Columbia says you can't be voting in another country. Incidentally, that's not the rule all over the world. Under the Maastricht Treaty, Americans who are living in European countries and are effectively domiciled there, which is defined as having physical residence plus the indefinite intention to remain, are given the right to vote in European localities. Again, just European local elections, not in EU elections or national elections, but if you are an American living in Barcelona or Spain indefinitely, you get to vote in local elections there, and they've adopted basically the same logic that the people in D.C. adopted, which is they want people who are living there indefinitely to be engaged in local government. With that, I'm going to yield 2 minutes to the very distinguished gentlelady, Ms. Ramirez.
Thank you, Ranking Member, and I couldn't agree with you more. I rise in opposition to H.R. 192. Look, this is another condescending Republican attempt to do three really specific things: meddle in local D.C. elections, disenfranchise Black and brown voters who are fully capable of governing themselves, by the way, and erode the trust of Americans in our federal elections. In the 118th Congress alone, Republicans have introduced 17 bills to overturn D.C.'s election laws. But they've refused to do the one thing that the residents of D.C. have asked for, and that's equal representation through statehood. In the Republican tradition of undermining elections, they are pushing this bill while the primary elections in D.C. are underway. Let's be clear. It is all intentional to stoke fear among voters and raise false alarms around the integrity of D.C.'s voting process. H.R. 192 is another sorry Republican effort to continue to carry on this baseless MAGA narrative about non-citizens affecting the outcomes of federal elections. Let's put this into context. A 2016 study of our federal elections found only 0.001% of votes cast were cases of suspected, not proven non-citizen voting. Even the former president's appointed commission to investigate his claims of voter fraud by non-citizens was disbanded without identifying one single case. In the meantime, a third of working-age Americans are living through crushing medical debt. Families are spending up to 75% of their income in rent and utilities. And scientists agree that the climate crisis may cause 14.5 million deaths by 2050. Yet here we are again. We need to stop entertaining legislation based on Republican lies. There are real problems that need to be addressed and comprehensive solutions. I yield back.